Hello, this is Pretty Guardian, and today I am excited to be bringing you episode 1 of our Mobile Gaming Monday series. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about my favorite mobile game of all time, Another Eden, the cat beyond time and space. I had actually recorded another video for Another Eden a long time ago for my channel here. And in it was that scene where one of the first few bosses, you're fighting this synth human named Galliard, and he comes riding in on this motorcycle, and the animations are badass, and it's just this really cool fight scene. For me, it was probably the first moment that really cemented how much of a true JRPG this game was, and I was totally hooked on it after that. But what really sucked is while recording the video, he beat me and I died and lost. So it was totally I don't know, my failure in the game. And I've been excited to make another video about the game ever since that point as well. I just wanted to give it some time so I could really experience more of the game and talk about it in a way that I feel is meaningful. So for this series, we're going to be breaking down the game, the music, the gameplay, the art style, the story, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the cash shop as well. But to start out from the top, I wanted to mention the music. So the composer for this game is Yasunori Mitsuda, and he is actually the composer from Chrono Trigger, and he also did the music to Edge of Eternity, which is one of the games that I'm following for this year. But just a really great composer for JRPG music, and to me, you can see that translated really well in Another Eden. Most of the tracks in any game are just kind of there. But sometimes there are tracks that stand out really well. And so there's two that really spring to mind for me with Another Eden. The first is that opening scene when you're in Baruki and the camera kind of pans out a little bit and you get this sweeping view of the village and the music starts playing and it's just upbeat and beautiful. And you get that sense of vibrancy and adventure and you're ready to start this beautiful JRPG game, totally done well. The second is the one when you're clicking on the wishing screen, or if you're in Space-Time Rift, it's the track that plays there. I just think it's a really beautiful, almost soothing. There is maybe the sense of something otherworldly with it, but just a really relaxing, dreamlike track. And I think they're both absolutely beautiful. And there's a lot of standout tracks throughout the game if you're paying attention to it. So beautiful soundtrack. I have to give it 5 out of 5. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the gameplay for Another Eden. So with the game, you have kind of your typical JRPG in the sense that there's an overarching storyline that you're following, and you go through dungeons, and you have turn-based battles against enemies. You have a party that you put together. You kind of level up and you're able to upgrade your gear and that sort of thing. And so there is definitely a gameplay loop in there that this game does really well. It kind of connects both the mobile experience with the traditional JRPG experience, and it mashes it up into something that's really lovely. I do, however, feel they cut their own legs out from time to time by limiting the gameplay. So there are a lot of I don't even want to call them puzzles because they're not quite puzzles, but in a lot of the dungeons, there are little tricks that you have to kind of overcome in order to progress through the dungeon. So just as an example, in the Tower of Time, you have to gather up those little stones from throughout the dungeon and you put them into a clock, and you want to get the clock to midnight in order to get to the final boss of that stage. And it's incredibly easy to do it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what it feels is they're trying to incorporate puzzles like you would get in a lot of the early Final Fantasy games. But because it's on a mobile platform, they're not quite as complex as they could be. So I get it, you want the game to be accessible. And at the same time, I feel there's a lot of little areas like that, where it's kind of limited by the fact that it's a mobile game. Because overall, you have like this really solid JRPG. It's just kind of like those little things in there that kind of hold it back. But I can't even complain that much because I've had such a great experience with it overall. And there's so much to do. There's like cooking and fishing, and there's quests. You've got the main story quest, you have sub-quests, you have all these like bonus episodes and stories that are happening all around you. So for gameplay, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I'm also going to tie us into the storyline of the game. And so the main storyline takes you across the multiverse, like different, I don't know, timelines, all kinds of crazy stuff kind of thrown in there and jumbled up. The story in a lot of ways is kind of cookie cutter, but you have this kind of grand overarching story that's happening. And for me, it's pretty engaging. Like I'm interested in the characters and seeing what happens to them and exploring all these different like worlds that they've created. It's just beautiful and engaging to me. Another kind of interesting detail about the story is that they got writer Masato Kato to work on it. And he is one of the writers from the original Chrono Trigger. So this is one of those games where it just seems like they kind of had the dream team as far as putting together a good JRPG. Where the story, I think, kind of falls short is in a lot of like the side quests and stuff. I've had a couple where like I was like, oh, that's a really sweet story, and it was kind of touching. But for the most part, they're so completely unrelated to the main storyline and the world and what's going on that they kind of don't matter. And I feel like that's kind of a wasted opportunity. Like you could be showing us more about the lore of Baruki or Parsifal or Elsion or all these cool places that you're taking us. You could really build up the side characters and the side stories in a way that's meaningful and still connects to the overall story of the game. But it doesn't quite do that. And maybe that ties into the fact that it's a mobile game. They don't necessarily, I don't know, care how invested you are in the side characters and the side happenings of this universe, because you might just be popping on for 5 minutes while you're waiting for your bus or something. Story, I'm gonna also give it a 4 out of 5. It kind of rates highly because of that good overarching story, but I'm subtracting that 1 point because some of the side stories are kind of meaningless. Next up, I want to talk about the art style. And for that one, I'll just tell you straight up, I'm giving it 5 out of 5. I think the art in this game is so beautiful. I think the stages are beautiful. The monster design is beautiful. The characters, you have kind of this like interesting design in the sense that they're chibi styled. So like they're kind of cutesy. Some of their details are missing. And at the same time, they've still incorporated so many details in the outfits and the weapons and the hair. And you just kind of have this like interesting mashup of that. And also the game takes place on kind of like a lined dungeon grid. So you're basically just like running back and forth in these lines, but they've still found ways to incorporate that into the overall art style of the game. So for example, when you're first entering Unigen, the like gate lifts up and you're like able to run through and explore this like really beautiful city. It's just really interesting. And the whole being on a linear thing, I actually think works out really well for this game. It kind of reminds me of the Tales of games where the battle system was held on a straight line. And also I feel like it simplifies dungeons back to the basics of what they are as far as like how you're able to navigate the map in those spaces. So art style, definitely a 5 out of 5 for me. The last thing I wanted to talk about with this game is the cash shop. And so for me, I never really felt like I was pushed into the cash shop. I never felt like I had to make a purchase. This is a game where I feel like you could have a very full and interesting experience without engaging in the monetization aspects of it. I did, however, end up spending 24 bucks on getting one of the wish packs, and it gave me a bunch of really good 5-star characters. And you do have a lot of those wish packs with guaranteed 5-star characters in them. So it kind of felt like a decent value. For me, I am still subtracting a point from the cash shop because I would have just liked to see a different variety of stuff in there. I don't like gambling in a game, but I still would have loved to have given them some of my money, you know? So having things like cosmetics and I don't know, kind of side stuff in there like that would have been really cool to me. So Cast Shop, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Just to kind of run you through our list again, we got music, 5 out of 5. Gameplay, 4 out of 5. Art style, 5 out of 5. Story, 4 out of 5. Cast Shop, 4 out of 5. So adding up all of the aspects of the game that we're looking at, my final score for it is an 88%. So a solid B+. One of the reasons that I chose this game as our first one to start the series with is because I knew how much I loved it. And I thought it would be kind of a good barometer to look at the rest of the games that we're going to be looking at with. So next week, we're going to be looking at Tales of Crestoria, and we'll have a solid starting point to compare it to. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this is Pretty Guardian, logging out.